Daniel slammed his resignation letter on his boss's desk before she could say a word. "I'm done," he said. "I won't let you destroy what we built." Victoria Hayes, CEO of one of the largest companies in Chicago, didn't flinch. She picked up the letter, read it slowly, and tore it in half. "You don't get to quit," she said. "Not after everything." 3 months earlier, Daniel had walked into a diner expecting a blind date. He was ready to leave after 20 minutes of waiting. Then the door opened and the most powerful woman he knew walked straight toward his table holding a gift meant for him. "Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels." Daniel checked his watch for the 11th time. 7:23. The date was supposed to arrive at 7. 23 minutes late. No text, no call, no apology. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, feeling the warmth seep into his palms. The mug had gone cold 10 minutes ago, but holding it gave him something to do. Something that made him look less like a man who'd been stood up. "Refill!" The waitress appeared beside him, coffee pot in hand. "No thank you." Daniel forced a smile. "I think I'll be leaving soon." She nodded, the kind of nod that said she'd seen this before. Men waiting. Women not showing. The eternal dance of disappointing first dates. Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. Nothing new, just the last text from Mark in accounting sent 2 days ago. "Trust me, my cousin is perfect for you. Just show up. You won't regret it." He was already regretting it. 53 years old, divorced for 6 years. 2 grown kids who called once a month if he was lucky. And here he was sitting in a diner on a Tuesday night waiting for a woman who couldn't be bothered to show up. This was Mark's fault. Mark with his endless optimism. Mark who believed everyone deserved love, even grumpy accountants who worked late and talked to no one. "She's not coming," Daniel muttered to himself. He reached for his wallet, ready to pay for the coffee he hadn't finished and the dignity he'd already lost. That's when the door opened. Daniel didn't look up at first. He'd looked up every time the door opened for the past 23 minutes. Each time disappointment. A couple arguing about parking. A teenager glued to his phone. An elderly woman shuffling toward the counter. But this time something shifted. The conversations around him seemed to quiet. Or maybe that was his imagination. Maybe he was just tired. He glanced toward the entrance. A woman stood just inside the doorway. She held a small red box tied with a gold ribbon. Her posture was perfect, shoulders back, chin level, like someone who'd spent years in rooms where weakness was noticed and remembered. She wasn't looking around nervously. She wasn't checking her phone. She simply stood there, scanning the room with calm, deliberate precision. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He knew that face. Everyone in his building knew that face. Victoria Hayes, CEO of Meridian Industries. The woman whose signature appeared on his paychecks. The woman who could fire 300 people before lunch and still make it to her afternoon meeting. She was here, in this diner, holding a gift box. What the hell? Daniel's first instinct was to look away, to pretend he hadn't seen her, to shrink into his booth and pray she was meeting someone else, anyone else. But her eyes found him, and she smiled. Not the corporate smile he'd seen in quarterly presentations. Not the practiced expression she wore when shaking hands with board members. This smile was different, softer, almost nervous. She walked toward him. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. His mind raced through possibilities. Had he done something wrong at work? Was this some kind of test? A hidden camera show? A fever dream brought on by too much overtime? She stopped at his table. "Hi," she said. Daniel shot to his feet so fast he nearly knocked over his cold coffee. The mug wobbled. He caught it. His face burned. "Ms. Hayes." His voice came out strangled. I wasn't expecting." "Please." She held up a hand. "Sit down. You're making me nervous." He sat. Then stood again. Then sat once more, feeling like a broken animatronic at a theme park. Victoria lowered herself into the booth across from him, placing the red gift box on the table between them. "I think there's been a mistake," Daniel said, his words tumbling out too fast. "I'm waiting for someone. A date. A blind date. So if you're here for—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "So am I." Daniel stared at her. "I'm sorry. I'm your blind date, Daniel." The words didn't compute. They bounced around his skull like pinballs, refusing to land anywhere that made sense. "That's not possible. And yet here I am. You're my CEO. I'm aware. You're my CEO." Victoria's lips twitched. "You mentioned that." Daniel pressed his palms flat against the table, steadying himself. "How is this? Why would you? Does Mark know?" "Mark?" She tilted her head. "The one in accounting. His cousin. She's supposed to be my date." Understanding flickered across Victoria's face, followed by something that looked almost like amusement. "Ah, the infamous cousin. I think we both got played." "What do you mean?" "My friend Sarah set this up. Anonymous date, she called it. No names, no photos, no expectations. Just two people meeting for coffee." Victoria paused. She failed to mention her perfect match worked for my company. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You didn't know," he said slowly. "You didn't know it was me. Not until I walked through that door." "Then why didn't you leave?" The question hung between them. Victoria's expression shifted, the confidence cracking just slightly, revealing something raw underneath. "I almost did," she admitted. "I stood in that doorway for a full 30 seconds, trying to convince myself to turn around." "What stopped you?" She met his eyes. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe curiosity. Maybe stubbornness." She paused. "Maybe I'm just tired of walking away from things that feel real." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The waitress reappeared, breaking the tension. "Can I get you anything?" "Coffee?" Victoria said. "Black. And whatever pie you'd recommend." "Apples fresh." "Perfect." The waitress glanced at Daniel. "And for you?" "I'll have the same." When she left, Daniel leaned back in his seat, studying the woman across from him. In the office, she was untouchable. A name on emails. A face on screens. A presence that made rooms go quiet. Here, under the diner's yellow lights, she looked almost ordinary, almost human. "This is insane," Daniel said finally. "Completely. If anyone from work sees us, they won't. But if they do, then we're two colleagues who happen to run into each other at a diner." Victoria's voice was calm, practiced. "People eat dinner, Daniel. It's not a crime. You know what I mean." "I do." She picked up the red gift box, turning it over in her hands. "Which is why I want to be very clear. Nothing happens here that you don't want. No pressure, no expectations, no consequences." "You can't promise that." "I can promise to try." Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. 3 hours ago, he'd been reviewing spreadsheets in his cubicle. Now he was sitting across from the most powerful woman in his professional life, discussing a blind date neither of them had planned. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked. "The anonymous date thing. You could have anyone." Victoria set the box down. For a moment she didn't answer. "Do you know what it's like," she said quietly, "to walk into a room and have everyone want something from you? A promotion, a favor, a piece of your time, your attention, your approval." Daniel shook his head slowly. "It's exhausting," she continued. "Every conversation becomes a transaction. Every smile has an agenda. Every question is really a request." She paused. "I wanted one evening where none of that mattered, where I could just be me. And you picked a random blind date. I picked anonymity. I picked the chance to meet someone who didn't know my name or my net worth or my corner office." She smiled sadly. Clearly the universe had other plans. The coffee arrived. The pie followed. Neither of them touched it. "I should go," Daniel said. "Probably. This is inappropriate. Extremely. If HR found out, they'd have a field day." Daniel picked up his fork, then set it down. "You're not helping." "I'm not trying to help." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, the same gesture Daniel had made earlier. "I'm trying to be honest. You're right. This is complicated. Messy. Probably a terrible idea." "Then why are you still sitting here?" "Because you are." The answer hit Daniel somewhere unexpected. Somewhere he'd bricked up years ago, after the divorce, after the empty apartment, after the kids stopped needing him. "I don't understand you," he admitted. "Most people don't." "No, I mean..." He struggled to find the words. "In the office, you're intimidating, untouchable. People are terrified of you." "I know. But right now you seem human." "Yeah." Victoria laughed, a real laugh, not the polished one from shareholder meetings. It changed her entire face. "I'll tell you a secret," she said. "The intimidating thing, it's survival. When you're a woman running a company this size, you can't afford to be soft. You can't afford to hesitate. You definitely can't afford to admit you're lonely." Daniel's chest tightened. "You're lonely." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pushed the red gift box toward him. "Open it." "What?" "The box. I brought it for my date. If that's not you, I'll take it back. But I'd like you to see it first." Daniel hesitated. Then slowly he picked up the box. It was lighter than he expected. He pulled the ribbon loose and lifted the lid. Inside was a watch. Simple. Elegant. The kind of thing you wore because it meant something, not because it showed off. "I noticed something about you," Victoria said. "At work. You're always early to meetings, always checking your watch. You do it when you're nervous, when you're waiting, when you're trying to look busy." Daniel stared at her. "You notice that? Good leaders notice things. But why would you?" "Because it told me something about you, that you care about being present, that you respect other people's time, that you're probably harder on yourself than anyone else ever could be." Daniel's throat felt tight. No one had ever seen him like that. Not his ex-wife, not his kids, not anyone in 30 years of corporate anonymity. "I don't know what to say," he managed. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that someone noticed. Someone paid attention." Victoria's voice softened. "Even if this never goes anywhere, I thought you should know that." Daniel closed the box. His hands were trembling slightly. "This scares me," he admitted. "It scares me too. If this goes wrong, I know. I could lose everything. My job, my reputation, my..." "So could I," Victoria interrupted. "My reputation, my credibility, everything I've built for 20 years. One wrong move, and the board turns on me. The press tears me apart. The woman who couldn't keep her personal life separate from her professional one. Then why risk it?" She leaned forward. "Because I'm 51 years old, Daniel. I've spent 3 decades building an empire. I have a penthouse with a view, a stock portfolio that could fund a small country, and a schedule that accounts for every 15 minutes of every day." She paused. "And I'm lonely. I'm so unbelievably lonely that I signed up for an anonymous blind date with a stranger, hoping, praying to feel something real for one goddamn evening." The rawness of her confession hung in the air between them. Daniel didn't speak for a long moment. He thought about his own life. The empty apartment. The microwave dinners. The evenings spent watching television alone, pretending he wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. "I understand," he said finally. "Do you? More than you know." Victoria studied his face. "So what do we do now? I have no idea." "Neither do I." She picked up her fork and cut into the apple pie. But this pie is getting cold and I didn't come all the way to this diner to waste perfectly good food. Despite everything, Daniel laughed. Is that your professional recommendation? Consider it executive guidance. She took a bite and nodded approvingly. Not bad. Try it. He did. She was right. It wasn't bad. They ate in silence for a moment. Not an awkward silence anymore. Something else. Something that felt almost comfortable. One conversation, Daniel said. Sorry. You asked what we do now. My answer is one conversation. Tonight. No promises. No expectations. Just two people who accidentally know too much about each other trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Victoria set down her fork. And tomorrow we go back to normal. You're my CEO. I'm an accountant who stays late and talks to no one. We pretend this never happened. And if we don't want to pretend? Daniel's heart skipped. Then we deal with that tomorrow. Victoria considered this. Then she nodded. One conversation, she agreed. But I have one condition. What? Stop calling me Ms. Hayes. For tonight, I'm just Victoria. Daniel, he replied. Just Daniel. She extended her hand across the table. He shook it. Her grip was firm, warm, real. Nice to meet you, Daniel. Nice to meet you too, Victoria. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Neither of them noticed. They talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. About the small towns they'd escaped and the big cities that had swallowed them. About failed marriages and distant children, and the quiet ache of success that no one warns you about. Victoria told him about her father, a factory worker who died believing ambition was a sin. Daniel told her about his mother who'd worked 3 jobs so he could afford college and passed away before he could thank her properly. They laughed. They argued. They discovered shared opinions on terrible movies and overrated restaurants and the specific way coffee should be made. For 3 hours, the world outside the booth disappeared. No CEO, no accountant, no hierarchy, no consequences. Just 2 people who'd found each other in the most impossible way imaginable. When the diner began closing, the waitress approached apologetically. Sorry, folks, we're shutting down for the night. Daniel looked at his watch, the old one, not the gift. It was nearly midnight. They'd been talking for almost 5 hours. I didn't realize how late it was, Victoria said, genuine surprise in her voice. Neither did I. They paid separately. That felt important somehow. Equal ground. Outside, the snow had covered the sidewalk in a thin layer of white. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air. Thank you, Victoria said, for staying. Thank you for walking through that door. She smiled. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she stepped closer and kissed him on the cheek. Brief, soft, a question and an answer, all at once. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. She walked to a waiting car. He watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then Daniel stood alone in the snow holding a red gift box, trying to remember how to breathe. Tomorrow, everything would be complicated. But tonight had been real. And sometimes that was enough. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every glance, every moment from the diner. The red gift box sat on his nightstand unopened since he'd placed it there. He couldn't bring himself to look at the watch again. Looking at it would make everything real. At 5:47 a.m. he gave up on sleep entirely. He showered, shaved, put on the same gray suit he wore every Tuesday, looked at himself in the mirror, and tried to recognize the man staring back. Get it together, he muttered. She's your CEO. Nothing happened. Nothing is going to happen. But his reflection didn't look convinced. The drive to work felt longer than usual. Every red light gave him time to think, and thinking was dangerous. He thought about her laugh, the way she'd said his name, the kiss on his cheek that still burned like a brand. By the time he pulled into the parking garage, his hands were shaking. Daniel walked through the lobby, with his head down, avoiding eye contact with the security guards, the receptionist, the early morning coffee crowd gathered near the elevators. He felt like everyone could see it on his face, like the word guilty was tattooed across his forehead. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside, and then a hand caught the door. "Hold it, please." Daniel's heart stopped. Victoria stepped into the elevator. She looked different in the fluorescent light. Sharper. The softness from last night had been replaced by something harder, more controlled. Her suit was immaculate. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her expression revealed nothing. "Good morning," she said, not looking at him. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes." The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. Daniel stared straight ahead at the brushed metal doors. His reflection stared back pale and terrified. Next to him, Victoria's reflection was perfectly composed. 12 floors to go. "Sleep well?" she asked quietly. "No." "Neither did I." 11 floors. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Daniel admitted. "I know." 10 floors. "I keep waiting for someone to point at me and say they know." "They don't know anything." Victoria's voice was calm, professional. Anyone listening would hear a CEO making small talk with an employee. And they won't, unless we give them a reason to. 9 floors. "I don't know if I can do this." "Do what?" "Pretend. Act like last night didn't happen, like you're just my boss, and I'm just—" "Daniel." Her voice sharpened slightly, a warning. "Not here." He fell silent. The elevator stopped on the 8th floor. 2 women from marketing stepped in, chattering about a client presentation. They nodded respectfully at Victoria, barely glanced at Daniel. The remaining floors passed in excruciating silence. When the doors opened on 12, Victoria stepped out without looking back. "Have a productive day, everyone," she said. And then she was gone. Daniel rode the elevator down to his floor, his chest tight, his thoughts spiraling. This was impossible. He couldn't spend 8 hours a day pretending he hadn't held her hand across a diner table, pretending he didn't know about her father, her loneliness, her fear of dying alone in a penthouse full of expensive things and empty rooms. He sat at his desk and stared at his computer screen. Work. He needed to work. Numbers. Spreadsheets. The comfortable anonymity of data that didn't ask questions or make him feel things. His inbox chimed. New message from Victoria Hayes. Daniel's finger hovered over the mouse. He looked around. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared what the quiet accountant in the corner was doing. He clicked. The subject line was empty. The message contained only 2 words. "I'm sorry." Daniel read it 3 times. Then he hit reply. For what? The response came 30 seconds later. For making this complicated. For not walking away when I should have. For thinking I could have one normal evening without consequences. Daniel typed slowly, choosing each word carefully. I don't regret last night. I regret that it has to be a secret. A pause. Then, secrets are what I do best. Before Daniel could respond, another message appeared. Delete this thread. Use your personal phone if you need to reach me. My number is in the watch box. He stared at the screen. Then carefully he deleted the entire conversation. Emptied his trash folder, cleared his cache. His desk phone rang, making him jump. Daniel, you coming to the 9 o'clock? Mark's voice was annoyingly cheerful. The quarterly review. Yeah, I'll be there. You okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, just tired. Late night. Daniel almost laughed. Something like that. The quarterly review was held in the large conference room on the executive floor. Daniel had attended dozens of these meetings. They were predictable, boring, safe. Executives talked about numbers. Accountants like Daniel sat in the back and took notes that nobody would ever read. Today, nothing felt safe. He arrived early, taking a seat in the far corner. The room filled slowly. Department heads, senior managers, People whose names Daniel had never bothered to learn because they'd never bothered to learn his. At exactly 9 o'clock, Victoria walked in. She commanded the room without saying a word. Conversations stopped. Chairs straightened. Phones disappeared into pockets. "Good morning, everyone," she said, taking her place at the head of the table. "Let's keep this efficient. I have a board call at 11. The meeting began. Slides appeared on the screen. People talked about margins and projections and strategic initiatives. Daniel took notes mechanically, his pen moving across the page, while his mind stayed fixed on the woman at the front of the room. She didn't look at him. Not once. Her eyes moved across the assembled faces, acknowledging people asking questions, challenging assumptions. But they never landed on Daniel's corner. He told himself that was good. Professional. Exactly what they'd agreed to. It still hurt. 45 minutes into the meeting, the CFO raised a question about a discrepancy in the Q3 numbers. A small error in the Eastern region's reporting. "Who handled the Eastern audit?" Victoria asked. Silence. "That would be me," Daniel heard himself say. Every head in the room turned toward him, including hers. "Daniel Carter," he added because suddenly he wasn't sure anyone knew his name. "Senior accountant." Victoria's expression didn't change. "Walk us through the discrepancy." His mouth went dry. This was exactly what he'd feared. Being seen. Being noticed. Being forced to stand in front of the woman who'd kissed his cheek 12 hours ago and pretend she was just his boss. But he was good at his job. That at least hadn't changed. Daniel stood, walked to the front of the room, explained the error, a misclassified expense that had been corrected in the final report, but not in the preliminary summary. "It's a formatting issue," he concluded. "The numbers are accurate. The presentation was flawed." "And this won't happen again?" Victoria asked. "No, ma'am." Their eyes met. Just for a second. Just long enough for him to see something flicker behind her professional mask. "Good," she said. "Thank you, Daniel. Let's move on." He returned to his seat. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. After the meeting, Daniel retreated to his desk and tried to focus on work. He lasted about 20 minutes. Then he pulled out his personal phone and opened the watch box. Inside, tucked beneath the watch, was a small card. Handwritten. A phone number and 3 words. "When you're ready." Daniel stared at the number for a long time. Then he saved it under a fake name, Mike Plummer, and sent a single message. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I'd like to try." The response came an hour later. "There's a coffee shop on Maple Street, 2 miles from the office. They close late. Tonight, 8 p.m. Daniel deleted the messages. Then he spent the rest of the day watching the clock and trying to remember how to breathe. The coffee shop was small and quiet, the kind of place that survived on regulars and refused to update its decor since the 90s. Daniel arrived first, choosing a table in the back corner, where they couldn't be seen from the street. Victoria arrived at exactly 8, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. No power suit. No armor. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just tired. "You came?" she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I wasn't sure." She ordered a tea when the waitress appeared. Daniel stuck with coffee. "Today was hard," she admitted once they were alone. "In that meeting, watching you stand up there knowing what I know. I almost threw up." "You hit it well. Years of practice." Daniel wrapped his hands around his mug. "My ex-wife used to say I had the emotional range of a filing cabinet." Victoria smiled. "She sounds charming." She had her moments, mostly at the end when she was telling me everything I'd done wrong. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" Daniel considered the question. It wasn't something he talked about. Ever. But something about Victoria made him want to be honest. "I worked too much," he said. "I was there physically, Every dinner, every school play, every family vacation. But I wasn't present. My mind was always somewhere else. On spreadsheets. On deadlines. On being so good at my job that no one could ever fire me. And she got tired of competing with your work. She got tired of losing. Daniel took a sip of his coffee. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The kids were grown. The marriage was dead. And I was 53 years old with nothing but a corner desk and a retirement fund. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Do you regret it? Every day. Then why did you keep working? Why not retire? Travel, start over. Because working is all I know. The admission came out rougher than he intended. Take away my job and what's left? A man who doesn't know how to talk to his own children, who eats dinner alone every night, who spent so long being invisible that he forgot how to be seen. Victoria reached across the table and touched his hand. Just briefly. Just enough. I see you, she said. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. Past the CEO, past the intimidating reputation, past the walls she'd built just as high as his. Why me? He asked. Out of everyone in that company, everyone in this city, why did you stay when you saw it was me? I told you, I was tired of walking away. That's not a real answer. Victoria withdrew her hand. She wrapped it around her teacup instead, staring into the steam. When I was 32, she said slowly, I was engaged. His name was Robert. He was kind, patient, everything I should have wanted. And I left him 3 weeks before the wedding. Why? Because I was terrified of being vulnerable, of needing someone, of letting another person see the parts of me I'd spent years hiding. She paused. I told myself I was choosing my career. That love was a distraction I couldn't afford. And I've spent 20 years proving myself right. And now I'm 51. I have everything I thought I wanted, and I've never been more alone. Her eyes met his. When I saw you in that diner, I recognized something. The same exhaustion, the same walls, the same desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still time to get it right. Daniel felt something crack inside him, something he'd kept locked away for years. I'm scared, he admitted. So am I. I don't know how to do this. The secrecy, the pretending, the constant fear of being discovered. Neither do I. Victoria's voice was steady, but her hands were trembling slightly around her cup. But I know I don't want to walk away, not this time. What if it destroys us? What if it doesn't? The question hung in the air between them. Heavy, dangerous, hopeful. One day at a time, Daniel said finally. That's all I can promise. That's all I'm asking. They stayed at the coffee shop until closing, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's rhythms, fears, dreams. When the waitress finally kicked them out, they stood in the parking lot, neither wanting to leave. Same time tomorrow? Victoria asked. I'll be here. She kissed him. Not on the cheek this time. A real kiss. Brief, but certain. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. He watched her drive away. Then he stood alone in the empty parking lot, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Daniel's life. By day, he was invisible. The quiet accountant in the corner. The man who arrived early left late and spoke only when spoken to. He attended meetings where Victoria commanded the room, and he watched her from the back without letting anything show. By night, he was someone else entirely. They met in secret places. Coffee shops in other towns. Restaurants where no one from the company would go. Once they drove 2 hours to have dinner in a city where nobody knew their names. They talked about everything. Their childhoods, their failures, their regrets. Daniel told her about his son, who'd stopped calling after the divorce. Victoria told him about her mother who'd died, believing Victoria had wasted her life chasing success instead of family. She was wrong, Daniel said. Was she? You built something that matters. That's not a waste. It feels empty sometimes. Everything feels empty when you don't have someone to share it with. Victoria looked at him with something he couldn't quite name. And now it feels a little less empty. At work they maintained perfect distance. Professional, cordial. Two people who barely knew each other. But the distance was getting harder to maintain. In meetings, Daniel caught himself watching her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The way her jaw tightened when someone gave a weak excuse. The way she smiled, really smiled when something genuinely amused her. He started noticing things he'd never seen before. How exhausted she looked some mornings. How she sometimes stared out the window during breaks lost in thought. How she carried the weight of 5,000 employees on shoulders that never seemed to rest. And he noticed that she was watching him too. Small glances across crowded rooms. A slight nod when they passed in the hallway. The briefest brush of fingers when he handed her a report. Each moment was a risk. Each moment was everything. People are going to notice, Daniel said one night. They were parked outside the city watching the lights from a hill that overlooked the skyline. Let them notice. You don't mean that. Victoria turned to face him. Maybe I do. Maybe I'm tired of hiding. Victoria. I know. The board, the shareholders, the endless parade of people waiting for me to fail. She leaned her head against the window. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just stopped caring. You'd lose everything you built. Would I? Or would I finally start living? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. But later that night, lying awake in his empty apartment, he found himself asking the same question. What was the point of building a life if you couldn't share it with anyone? What was the point of success if you had to hide the one thing that made you happy? What was the point of any of it? 3 months passed. Then 4. The secret grew heavier with each day. Daniel felt it pressing down on him, a constant weight that never lifted. At work, he smiled and nodded and pretended everything was normal. At night, he counted the hours until he could see her again. He was happy. Genuinely, terrifyingly happy. And he was certain it couldn't last. The first crack appeared at the annual strategy retreat. 3 days at a resort outside the city. Mandatory attendance for all department heads and senior staff, including quiet accountants who handled Eastern Region audits. I don't think this is a good idea, Daniel said the night before they left. They were at their usual coffee shop, the one with the bad decor and the waitress who never asked questions. It's 3 days, Victoria replied. We've spent 4 months pretending. We can manage 3 more days. There'll be alcohol, late nights, people watching. Then we'll be careful. We're always careful. But this feels different. Dangerous. Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. Are you asking me to stay away from you? No, I'm asking you to help me survive it. She squeezed his fingers. We'll survive it together. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, that the weight of their secret was about to crush them both. The retreat started normally enough. Meetings, presentations, team-building exercises that everyone hated but pretended to enjoy. Daniel kept to himself, playing the role of invisible accountant with practiced ease. Victoria played her role too. The commanding CEO. The untouchable leader. The woman who shook hands and remembered names and never let anything slip. But on the second night the cracks began to show. There was wine. Too much wine. And whispers. Daniel noticed them first. Conversations that stopped when he walked by. Glances that lingered a moment too long. 2 women from HR huddled in a corner looking at him and then at Victoria, their expressions speculative. He found Victoria on the balcony overlooking the resort's garden. They know, he said quietly. They suspect. That's different. Is it? She didn't answer. What do we do? Victoria turned to face him. In the dim light, she looked tired, older, human. "I don't know," she admitted. "For the first time in 20 years, I don't know." Daniel wanted to touch her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but they weren't alone. They were never alone. "Whatever happens," he said, "I don't regret this. Any of it." "Neither do I." They stood there for a moment longer, two people on the edge of everything. Then Victoria straightened her shoulders, fixed her expression, and walked back inside. Daniel stayed on the balcony watching her go. He didn't know it yet, but the next morning would change everything. The knock came at 7:14 a.m. Daniel was barely awake, still sitting on the edge of his bed, trying to remember why his chest felt so tight. The retreat, the whispers, Victoria's face in the moonlight. He opened the door. A woman stood in the hallway, mid-40s, navy blazer. The kind of neutral expression that meant nothing good. "Mr. Carter, I'm Sandra Mitchell, Director of Human Resources." Daniel's blood turned to ice. "We'd like to speak with you this morning. Conference room B whenever you're ready." "About what?" Sandra's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just a routine conversation. Nothing to worry about." She turned and walked away before he could respond. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it, his heart hammering. Routine conversation. Right. HR didn't pull people aside at company retreats for routine conversations. They did it for investigations, for accusations, for the kind of thing that ended careers. He grabbed his phone and typed a message to Victoria. "HR wants to see me. Conference room B." The response came immediately. "Don't panic. Don't admit anything. I'll handle it." "How?" "Trust me." Daniel stared at those two words. Trust me. He'd spent 53 years trusting no one but himself. Now everything depended on trusting a woman he'd known for 4 months. He got dressed, dark slacks, white shirt, no tie. His hands shook as he buttoned his collar. Conference room B was on the second floor of the resort's main building. Daniel walked slowly, rehearsing answers to questions that hadn't been asked yet. What could they know? What could they prove? Had someone seen them? Heard something? Found a message he'd forgotten to delete? The door was open when he arrived. Sandra sat at one end of the table. Across from her was a man Daniel didn't recognize. Gray hair, expensive watch, the kind of face that had delivered bad news to thousands of people. "Mr. Carter, please sit down." Daniel sat. "This is Richard Greer, outside counsel for the company." A lawyer. They'd brought a lawyer. "Am I in some kind of trouble?" Daniel asked. "That depends on you," Richard said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "We're here to ask some questions. You're not obligated to answer, but cooperation is appreciated." "Questions about what?" Sandra folded her hands on the table. "Mr. Carter, how would you describe your relationship with Victoria Hayes?" There it was. No preamble, no warm-up, just the question that could destroy everything. "She's my CEO," Daniel said carefully. "My employer. And beyond that, I don't know what you mean." Richard leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, we have reason to believe that you and Ms. Hayes have been engaged in a personal relationship outside of work. A romantic relationship." "Who told you that?" "That's not relevant right now." "It's relevant to me." Daniel's voice came out sharper than he intended. "You're accusing me of something. I'd like to know why." Sandra and Richard exchanged a glance. "Several colleagues have reported observing unusual interactions between you and Ms. Hayes," Sandra said. "Extended eye contact, private conversations. You were seen leaving the balcony area last night shortly after she did." "That's not evidence of anything." "You're right. It's not." Richard's tone was infuriatingly calm, "which is why we're asking you directly. Is there anything you'd like to disclose about the nature of your relationship with Victoria Hayes?" Daniel's mind raced. He could deny everything. There was no proof, just whispers and speculation and the paranoid imaginations of people with too much time and too little work. But lying felt wrong, not just risky wrong. He thought about Victoria, about the way she'd looked at him that first night in the diner holding a gift meant for someone else, about the months of secret meetings and stolen moments and the constant exhausting weight of hiding. He thought about what she'd said on the balcony. Maybe I'm tired of hiding. Mr. Carter, Sandra prompted. Do you have anything to say? Daniel took a breath, then another, and then he made a decision that would change everything. Yes, he said. I have something to disclose. The words came out slowly at first, then faster. The blind date, the diner, the months of secret meetings, the coffee shops, the late-night conversations, the feelings that had grown from something unexpected into something real. He told them everything. Sandra's expression remained neutral throughout. Richard took notes. Neither interrupted. When Daniel finished, silence filled the room. Thank you for your honesty, Sandra said finally. We appreciate your cooperation. What happens now? Now we speak with Ms. Hayes. Daniel's stomach dropped. She doesn't know I'm here. She doesn't know I've told you anything. We'll handle it appropriately. Please. Daniel leaned forward. Whatever consequences come from this, they should fall on me. I'm the one who... Mr. Carter. Richard's voice cut through. Ms. Hayes is the CEO of this company. She has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders and a duty to maintain professional standards. If what you've told us is accurate, she's the one who failed to meet those obligations. That's not fair. Fair isn't our concern. Policy is. Daniel wanted to argue, to fight, to throw himself between Victoria and whatever was coming. But there was nothing left to say. Sandra stood. You're free to go. We ask that you don't discuss this conversation with anyone until the matter is resolved. And Victoria. Ms. Hayes will be contacted shortly. Daniel walked out of conference room B feeling like he'd just detonated a bomb. His legs were unsteady. His vision blurred at the edges. He'd told the truth, and the truth was about to destroy them both. The next 2 hours were the longest of Daniel's life. He sat in his room staring at his phone waiting for a message that didn't come. He thought about calling Victoria, warning her. But what would he say? I confessed everything, good luck. At 10:43 a.m., there was another knock at his door. This time it was Victoria. She walked in without waiting to be invited. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. They told me what you said. Victoria, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. They knew. They already knew and I couldn't. Daniel. She held up a hand. Stop. He stopped. I'm not angry with you. You should be. Maybe. But I'm not. She sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked small, fragile. I knew this day would come. I've been preparing for it since that first night at the diner. What happens now? Now the board gets involved. Emergency session. Probably tomorrow. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Merry Christmas to the shareholders. They can't fire you. You built that company. They can do whatever they want. I serve at their pleasure. She looked up at him. I always knew that. I just thought I'd have more time. Daniel sat beside her, close enough to touch but not touching. Not yet. I'll resign, he said. If that helps. If that makes this go away. It won't. Then what can I do? Nothing. The word came out flat, final. This isn't about you, Daniel. It's about me. About a woman who should have known better, who did know better and did it anyway. Don't do that. Do what? Blame yourself. We both made choices. We both knew the risks. You didn't know all of them. Victoria's voice hardened. I'm the CEO. I had power over your career, your livelihood, your future. In their eyes, you were vulnerable. I was predatory. That's not what this was. It doesn't matter what this was. It matters what it looks like. Daniel reached for her hand. She let him take it. I don't care what it looks like, he said. I care about what it is. And what it is the realest thing I've felt in 20 years. Victoria's eyes glistened. She blinked, and a single tear slid down her cheek. I care about you, she whispered. More than I should. More than I ever expected. Then we fight this together. You can't fight with me, not anymore. If we stand together, they'll see conspiracy, coordination. Two people trying to cover their tracks. She squeezed his hand. The only way to protect you is to take the fall alone. I won't let you do that. You don't have a choice. The retreat ended early. Official word was that Victoria had been called back to handle an urgent business matter. Unofficial word spread through the resort like wildfire. Whispers in hallways. Speculative glances. The CEO's name mentioned in hushed tones. Daniel drove back to Chicago alone. Victoria had taken a separate car headed straight for an emergency board meeting that would determine the rest of her life. He stopped at their coffee shop on the way. The one with the bad decor and the waitress who never asked questions. He sat at their usual table and ordered coffee he didn't drink. His phone buzzed twice. Both times it was Mark from accounting asking if he was okay. He didn't respond. At 6:47 p.m., a message arrived from a number he didn't recognize. Board voted. Unanimous. Daniel's hands trembled as he typed back. What does that mean? It means I'm no longer CEO of Meridian Industries. He stared at the screen. Read the words again. They didn't change. Victoria. Don't. Not here. Not like this. Where are you? A pause. Then, my apartment. Tower 3 penthouse. The doorman knows your name. Daniel paid for his untouched coffee and drove through the city faster than he should have. The building was glass and steel, the kind of place that whispered money and power and carefully curated success. The doorman nodded when Daniel gave his name. She's expecting you. Take the private elevator. He rode up 42 floors alone. The doors opened directly into the penthouse. Victoria stood by the window silhouetted against the city lights. She didn't turn when he walked in. Nice view, Daniel said. I've barely noticed it in 15 years. Her voice was distant. Too busy working to look out the window. He crossed the room and stood beside her. Tell me what happened. What do you think happened? The board met. They reviewed the facts. They determined that my personal conduct had created unacceptable liability for the company. She recited the words like a script she'd memorized. I was offered two choices. Resign with dignity or be terminated for cause. That's not a choice. No, it's not. So you resigned. I resigned. Victoria finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like a woman who had cried for hours and then stopped because there were no tears left. 23 years. I gave them 23 years. I built that company from nothing. I sacrificed everything, my relationships, my health, my chance at a family, everything. And they took it away in a 90-minute meeting. Victoria, do you want to know the worst part? Her voice cracked. Not a single person defended me. Not one. All those executives I mentored, all those careers I built. They sat there in silence while the lawyers talked about liability, and the board talked about optics, and everyone pretended that my entire life's work meant nothing. Daniel didn't know what to say, so he did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her into his arms and held her. She resisted at first, stiff, defensive, the armor she'd worn for 30 years refusing to come off. Then she broke. The sobs came in waves, years of suppressed grief and loneliness and exhaustion pouring out against his shoulder. Daniel held her through all of it, saying nothing, letting her feel whatever she needed to feel. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back and looked at him. "I'm supposed to be stronger than this," she said. "No one's that strong." "I used to be." "No, you didn't. You just pretended better." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just old enough to recognize suffering when I see it." Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "What do we do now?" "I don't know." "That's not very reassuring." "I'm not trying to be reassuring. I'm trying to be honest." Daniel cupped her face in his hands. "I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if it can be fixed. But I know one thing." "What?" "I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him, searching his face for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he didn't mean it. She didn't find one. "You should," she whispered. "Go. Forget about me. Find someone who isn't a liability. Someone who won't cost you your job, your reputation, your..." "Victoria." He stopped her with a kiss. Brief, tender, certain. "I made my choice. I'm standing by it." "Why?" "Because you're worth it." They stood together in the penthouse, two broken people, holding each other up while the city glittered 42 floors below. The next morning, Daniel went back to work. He expected whispers, he expected stares, he expected to be called into HR and told his services were no longer required. Instead, he found something worse. Nothing. Everyone acted normal. Too normal. Like Victoria's resignation had never happened. Like the most powerful woman in the building hadn't been erased overnight. The new CEO was announced at 11 a.m. Thomas Wright, former COO, a man Daniel had never spoken to directly. The email was carefully worded. New direction, exciting opportunities, seamless transition. Not a single mention of Victoria Hayes. Daniel sat at his desk and stared at his screen. The same numbers, the same spreadsheets, the same gray walls and fluorescent lights and coffee that tasted like disappointment. Everything was the same. Everything was different. At lunch, Mark from accounting stopped by his desk. "Hey, you okay?" "Fine." "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." Mark hesitated. "Look, I don't know what happened at that retreat. I don't know what's going on between you and, well, whatever. I just wanted to say I'm here, if you need to talk." Daniel looked at him. Mark with his relentless optimism and his terrible blind date setups and his genuine, uncomplicated kindness. "Thanks," Daniel said. "I appreciate it." "Sure." Mark started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think she was a good CEO. Better than most. Whatever happened, I hope it works out." Daniel nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. That evening, he drove to Victoria's penthouse. The doorman let him up without question. She was sitting on the couch, still in the same clothes as yesterday. A bottle of wine sat on the coffee table, half empty. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would. I thought you might change your mind, in the light of day, away from all this." Daniel sat beside her. "I didn't." "Why not?" "Because I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air. Victoria went very still. "Daniel." "I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. I know everything about this situation is wrong and messy and probably doomed." He took her hand. "But I love you. I've loved you since that night at the diner, when you were brave enough to stay, even when you should have walked away." Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. "You shouldn't love me. I've ruined your life." "You've saved my life." He meant it, every word. "I was dead before I met you. Going through the motions. Waiting to retire so I could wait to die. You woke me up. You made me feel something again. and I'm not letting that go. The company is just a company. I can find another job. Your reputation was invisible to begin with. No one knew who I was. But, Victoria, he squeezed her hand. Stop trying to protect me from choices I've already made. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Not brief this time, not tender, desperate, hungry, like she'd been drowning for 30 years and he was finally air. When they broke apart, she whispered, I love you too. I know. No, you don't. You don't know how long it's been since I said those words to anyone. Her voice shook. I built walls so high that I forgot there was another side. I convinced myself that love was weakness, that needing someone meant being vulnerable, that being vulnerable meant being destroyed. And now I'm destroyed anyway. But at least I'm not alone. Daniel pulled her close. She rested her head against his chest. What do we do tomorrow? She asked. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Victoria was silent for a moment. Then she laughed. A real laugh, exhausted and ragged and somehow still beautiful. You know what's funny? I spent my whole career planning for everything. Contingencies for contingencies. I had backup plans for my backup plans. And I never planned for this. For you. She looked up at him. You weren't in any of my spreadsheets, Daniel Carter. Good. Spreadsheets are boring. You're an accountant. I know. That's how I know they're boring. She laughed again. And for the first time in 2 days, something loosened in Daniel's chest. They had lost everything. But they had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Victoria didn't leave her penthouse. She didn't answer calls from former colleagues. She didn't read the business news that picked apart her resignation like vultures on a carcass. She sat by the window and watched the city move without her, a kingdom she'd built and lost in the same lifetime. Daniel came every night after work. He brought takeout she barely touched and stories from the office she pretended not to care about. He held her when the silence became too heavy and talked her through the darkness that crept in at 3 a.m. On the 22nd day, she finally spoke the words he'd been dreading. You need to quit. Daniel looked up from the container of cold lo mein he'd been pushing around. What? Your job, Meridian. You need to leave. Victoria, I'm serious. She turned from the window for the first time that evening. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks, sharper. They're going to push you out eventually. Thomas Wright isn't stupid. He knows you were connected to me. Sooner or later, he'll find a reason. Let him try. Daniel, listen to me. She crossed the room and sat beside him. I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about what comes next. For me. For us. And I realized something. What? As long as you're there, we're not free. We're still tied to that place, those people, that world that decided we weren't worth protecting. She took his hands. I want us to start over, really start over, and we can't do that if you're still trapped in the wreckage. Daniel's jaw tightened. So I just walk away 26 years of my life and I just quit? Yes. It's not that simple. Why not? Because that job is all I have, all I've ever had. Without it, I'm nothing. Victoria's expression softened. That's not true. Isn't it? Daniel pulled his hands back. You built an empire. You have money, connections, options. I have a pension that won't kick in for another 7 years and a studio apartment I can barely afford. Money isn't easy to say when you have it. The words came out sharper than he intended. Victoria flinched. Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and heavy. I'm sorry, Daniel said finally. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Victoria's voice was quiet. And you're right. I have resources you don't. That's not fair. It's never been fair. She stood and walked back to the window. But I'm not asking you to quit because I want to control your life. I'm asking because I love you. And I can't watch them slowly destroy you the way they destroyed me. They didn't destroy you, didn't they? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Look at me, Daniel. I haven't left this apartment in 3 weeks. I've built nothing, accomplished nothing. I wake up every morning and spend an hour remembering that everything I worked for is gone. That's temporary. Is it? Daniel stood and crossed to where she stood. He put his hands on her shoulders, turning her gently to face him. Listen to me, he said. You are not destroyed. You are not finished. You are the strongest person I've ever met, and you're going through the worst thing that's ever happened to you. That's different. It doesn't feel different. I know, but it will. He cupped her face in his hands. And when you're ready to rebuild, I'll be right there with you. Whether I'm working at Meridian or flipping burgers at McDonald's. A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. You'd be a terrible burger flipper. Probably, but I'd try. She leaned into his touch. I don't want you to sacrifice your career for me. It's not a sacrifice if I choose it. Daniel? Let me think about it, okay? Give me a few days. This is a big decision. Victoria nodded. Okay. A few days. But Daniel already knew what he was going to do. He'd known since the moment he walked into that HR meeting and told the truth. The resignation letter sat in his desk drawer for 3 days before he found the courage to deliver it. He wrote it by hand. Old-fashioned maybe, but it felt right. Some things deserved more than a typed email and a digital signature. On the morning of the 4th day, Daniel put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to his interview 26 years ago, and drove to the office one last time. The security guard nodded as he walked in. The receptionist smiled. The elevator played the same terrible music it had played for a decade. Everything was the same. Everything was ending. Thomas Wright's assistant looked surprised when Daniel appeared at her desk. Mr. Carter, do you have an appointment? No, but I need 5 minutes. Mr. Wright is very busy. Tell him it's about Victoria Hayes. The assistant's expression flickered. She picked up her phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. He'll see you now. Thomas Wright's office was twice the size of Victoria's had been. New furniture, new art, new everything, as if erasing all traces of the woman who'd built this company from nothing. Wright stood behind his desk, smiling the smile of a man who'd won. Daniel, this is unexpected. I'll be brief. Daniel crossed to the desk and placed the envelope in front of him. My resignation, effective immediately. Wright didn't touch it. That's unfortunate. You're a valuable employee. No, I'm not. I'm an accountant who stayed late and talked to no one. You won't even notice I'm gone. That's harsh. It's honest. Daniel met the man's eyes. I'm not here to make a scene or cause problems. I just wanted to deliver this in person. May I ask why? You know why. Wright's smile faded slightly. The Victoria situation. Don't call it that. Excuse me. Don't call her a situation. She's a person. A person who gave 23 years of her life to this company. A person you threw away like yesterday's newspaper because she made the mistake of being human. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. Daniel's voice stayed level, but his hands were shaking. I was there. I saw her face when she realized no one was going to defend her. 23 years of loyalty, and not a single person spoke up. Wright leaned back in his chair. Victoria made choices that put the company at risk. The board had no choice but to act. She fell in love. That's not a crime. It is when you're the CEO and the object of your affection is a subordinate. I wasn't her subordinate. I was an accountant in a different department. We never even spoke at work. The optics. Damn the optics. Daniel slammed his palm on the desk. Wright startled. You didn't fire her because of optics. You fired her because she was a woman who dared to have a personal life. If she'd been a man, you would have given her a slap on the wrist and a 6-month leave of absence. That's not true. We both know it is. Silence filled the office. Wright's jaw tightened. Is there anything else? He asked coldly. Just one thing. Daniel straightened his jacket. When this company starts to fail, and it will because you don't have half the vision she had, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you had a chance to keep her, to work something out. And you chose ego over excellence. Are you finished? I'm finished. Daniel turned and walked out of the office. He didn't look back. The elevator ride down felt different this time. Lighter. Like he was shedding a skin he'd worn for too long. 26 years. Gone in 5 minutes. And he didn't regret a single word. Victoria was waiting when he got back to the penthouse. She stood by the door, arms crossed, face tense. Well, Daniel held up his empty hands. I'm unemployed. You actually did it. I actually did it. How do you feel? Daniel considered the question. He expected to feel scared, lost, adrift in a world that had always been defined by his job, his cubicle, his carefully maintained invisibility. Instead, he felt free. Terrified, he admitted, and relieved, and kind of hungry. Is there any of that lo mein left? Victoria stared at him for a moment. Then she laughed, a real laugh, the first he'd heard in weeks. You're insane, she said. Probably. You just threw away your career. I know. For me. For us. He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. I told you, I'm not going anywhere. Daniel? I know it's scary. I know we don't have a plan. I know everything is uncertain and messy, and probably a disaster waiting to happen. He pulled back to look at her. But I also know that I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly who I want to be with. Victoria's eyes glistened. I don't deserve you. Too bad. You're stuck with me. She kissed him then. Deep. Real. The kind of kiss that says everything words can't. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, What do we do now? Now we figure it out. Together. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. Victoria took his hand and led him to the couch. They sat together, shoulders touching, looking out at the city that had chewed them up and spit them out. I've been thinking, she said slowly, about what comes next. And I think I need to leave Chicago. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Leave? Not forever, just for a while. Get away from all of this. The whispers, the gossip, the constant reminders of what I lost. She turned to face him. There's a place in Vermont, a small town where my grandmother grew up. I used to visit as a kid before everything got complicated. Vermont. I know it sounds crazy. The former CEO of a major corporation hiding out in rural New England. She smiled sadly. But I need to breathe, Daniel. I need space to figure out who I am without the title, without the corner office, without everyone watching and waiting for me to fail. How long? I don't know. A few months, maybe longer. Daniel was quiet for a moment, processing. Vermont, a few months. The woman he loved 3 states away, figuring out her life while he figured out his. Okay, he said. Victoria blinked. Okay? Okay. If that's what you need, then that's what you should do. But what about us? What about us? Daniel squeezed her hand. You're not dying, Victoria. You're healing. And healing takes time and space, and whatever else you need. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. You'd wait for me. I'd do more than wait. I'd visit, call, send annoyingly long text messages about the weather and what I had for breakfast. He smiled. Long distance isn't ideal, but it's not impossible either. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Why are you like this? Like what? Good, kind, understanding. She wiped her eyes impatiently. I keep waiting for you to reveal some horrible flaw, some deal breaker that makes all of this make sense. Sorry to disappoint. I'm just a boring accountant who fell in love with his CEO. Former CEO. Former CEO, current love of my life. Victoria laughed through her tears. That's cheesy. I know, I'm working on it. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Come with me. What? To Vermont. Come with me. Daniel's heart stuttered. Victoria? I know it's a lot to ask. You have your life here, your apartment, well, I guess not your job anymore. Thanks for the reminder. But I realized something just now listening to you talk about waiting and long distance and annoying text messages. She sat up and looked at him directly. I don't want to do this alone. I've done everything alone for 30 years, and I'm tired of it. You want me to move to Vermont with you? I want you to live with me. Build something new with me. Figure out who we are together, away from all of this. Her voice shook slightly. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together for a few months. I know everything about this is backwards and unconventional and probably insane. It is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know. We're both unemployed. We have no plan, no safety net, no idea what we're doing. I know. Victoria's voice dropped. But I also know that when I imagine my future, really imagine it beyond the fear and the uncertainty, you're in it. Every version, every possibility. You're there. Daniel stared at her. This woman who had terrified him in boardrooms, who had commanded armies of executives with a single raised eyebrow, who had built an empire and watched it crumble and was still somehow standing. She was asking him to leap. And for the first time in 53 years, Daniel wanted to jump. Okay, he said. Okay. Let's go to Vermont. Victoria's face broke into a smile so bright it hurt to look at. Really? Really, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I'm not living off your money. I'll find a job. Something, anything. I need to contribute. Done. Second, we take it slow. Moving in together doesn't mean we have to figure everything out immediately. We give ourselves room to adjust. Agreed. Third, he paused. I need to talk to my kids first. Victoria's expression softened. Of course. They barely know me. They might not even care. But I need to tell them, explain, try to repair something before I disappear to another state. Take all the time you need. Daniel nodded. Then he laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that surprised them both. What? Victoria asked. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a diner waiting for a blind date who didn't show up. And now I'm about to move to Vermont with my former CEO. Life is strange. Life is insane. Any regrets? Daniel looked at her. Really looked. At the woman behind the title. The heart behind the armor. The human being who had chosen him against all odds, against all logic, against everything. Not one, he said. The call to his son was harder than Daniel expected. He hadn't spoken to Michael in 3 months. Their last conversation had been stilted and brief, a birthday call that lasted exactly 4 minutes before they ran out of things to say. Now Daniel sat on Victoria's couch, phone in hand, trying to find the courage to dial. You don't have to do this alone, Victoria said from across the room. I do, actually. This is something I should have done years ago. He pressed the button. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Dad? Hey, Michael. Do you have a minute? A pause. Is everything okay? Yeah. No. Daniel took a breath. I need to tell you some things, and I need you to just listen, okay? Before you react. You're scaring me. I'm sorry. That's not my intention. Daniel closed his eyes. I quit my job last week. Silence. Michael. I'm here. You quit? After everything you always said about stability and responsibility, and I know what I said. I was wrong. Dad, what's going on? Daniel told him. Not everything. Not the scandal. Not the HR investigation. Not the ugly details that didn't matter anymore. But the important parts: meeting Victoria, falling in love, making choices that didn't fit the life he'd always lived. When he finished, Michael was quiet for a long moment. "So you're moving to Vermont," he said finally. "With your girlfriend, who used to be your CEO." "That's the summary, yes." "And you're calling to tell me this because I'm your father. Because I should have called more, visited more, been more present." Daniel's voice cracked. "Because I spent your entire childhood being physically there and emotionally absent, and I don't want to make the same mistake again." "Dad? I know I can't fix the past. I know I missed too much, but I'm trying to be different now. Better. And I wanted you to hear it from me, not through some gossip chain or awkward family dinner." Michael was silent again. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "You really love her. This Victoria woman. More than I knew I could love anyone. And she makes you happy. She makes me feel alive, for the first time in decades." "Then I'm glad for you, Dad." Daniel blinked. "You are? Yeah, I mean, it's weird as hell, and I'm definitely going to need time to process. But..." Michael sighed. "Mom's moved on. She's happy. I always wondered if you would too, and now you are. So, yeah, I'm glad." "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just don't disappear, okay? Vermont isn't that far. Maybe I can visit. Meet this mystery woman who turned my boring accountant father into someone who quits jobs and moves across the country." Daniel laughed, tears streaming down his face. "I'd like that." "Me too. I love you, Michael. I don't say it enough, but I do." "I know, Dad. I love you too." When Daniel hung up, Victoria was standing in the doorway watching him with soft eyes. "Good?" she asked. "Better than good." He wiped his face. "He wants to meet you." "That's terrifying." "Join the club." She crossed to him and sat beside him, taking his hand. "I called a realtor today," she said. "Found a place in Vermont. Small farmhouse on 3 acres. Nothing fancy. But it has a view." "You actually looked at views this time?" "I'm trying new things." She smiled. "There's room for an office. Maybe you can do freelance accounting, or consulting, or something entirely different." "Like what?" "I don't know. Whatever you want, that's the point." She squeezed his hand. "For the first time in our lives, we get to choose." Daniel looked at her, at this woman who had turned his world upside down, who had cost him everything he thought he wanted, and given him everything he actually needed. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Next week, if you're ready." "I'm ready." Victoria kissed him softly. "Then let's go build something new." The next 7 days were a blur. Daniel packed up his apartment in 3 boxes. 26 years of corporate life and everything that mattered fit in the trunk of his car. He donated the furniture, canceled the utilities, stood in the empty living room one last time and felt nothing but relief. Victoria handled the penthouse the same way, efficient, detached, ready to let go. "Do you want to keep any of this?" Daniel asked, gesturing at the expensive art and designer furniture. "No, it was never really mine anyway. It was hers." Hers. The CEO, the persona, the woman I pretended to be for 30 years. Victoria looked around the room. "She lived here. I'm going somewhere else." On the morning they left, the sun was just rising over Chicago. Daniel stood by his car, watching the city wake up one last time. Victoria joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Saying goodbye?" she asked. "Something like that." "Any regrets?" Daniel thought about it. 26 years, the cubicle, the spreadsheets, the careful invisibility that had kept him safe and slowly killed him. Then he thought about her, the diner, the blind date that wasn't, the woman who had walked toward his table and changed everything. "Not one," he said. They got in the car. Daniel behind the wheel, Victoria beside him, the open road ahead. And for the first time in 53 years, Daniel Carter drove toward something instead of away from it. The farmhouse was smaller than the photos suggested. Daniel stood in the driveway, bags at his feet, staring at the weathered wooden structure that would become their home. The paint was peeling in places. The porch sagged slightly on one side. A rusted weather vane creaked in the wind. "It needs work," Victoria said beside him. That's one way to put it. The realtor called it charming with character. The realtor was a liar. Victoria laughed, that real laugh he'd grown to love. "Come on, let's see the inside." The inside was better. Hardwood floors that groaned with history. A fireplace big enough to sit in. Windows that let in more light than Daniel had seen in years of fluorescent office existence. "The kitchen needs updating," Victoria said, running her hand along the dated countertops. "And the bathroom is basically from 1972, but the bones are good." "You sound like you know what you're talking about." "I watched a lot of HGTV during my depression spiral." She turned to him with a small smile. "What do you think?" Daniel looked around. At the dust motes floating in the afternoon sun. At the ancient appliances and faded wallpaper, and everything that was wrong and imperfect, and absolutely nothing like the life he'd left behind. "I think it's perfect," he said. The first month was the hardest. They had no routines, no structure, no external demands, telling them when to wake up, what to do, who to be. After decades of corporate schedules and mandatory meetings, and the relentless rhythm of work, the silence was disorienting. Daniel found himself waking at 5 a.m., his body convinced there was somewhere he needed to be. He'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Victoria breathe beside him, trying to remember that nothing was required of him anymore. "You're doing it again," Victoria murmured one morning, her eyes still closed. "Doing what?" "Thinking too loud. I can hear you worrying from here." "Sorry." She rolled over and looked at him. "What is it today?" "I don't know. Everything. Nothing." He rubbed his face. "I feel useless." "You're not useless." "I haven't done anything productive in 3 weeks." "Productivity isn't the only measure of worth," says the woman who built a billion-dollar company. Victoria propped herself up on one elbow. "That woman doesn't exist anymore. Remember?" Daniel sighed. "I know. I'm just adjusting." "So adjust slower." She leaned over and kissed his forehead. "We have time now. That's the whole point." But time, Daniel discovered, was harder to fill than he expected. He tried reading, couldn't focus, tried cooking, burned everything, tried fixing the porch, nearly put a nail through his hand. Victoria found him sitting on the damaged porch steps, sucking his bleeding thumb, looking defeated. "Bad day?" she asked. "I'm an accountant. I work with numbers. Why did I think I could work with wood?" "Because you wanted to contribute." "I wanted to not be completely worthless." Victoria sat beside him. "Daniel, look at me." He looked. "You are not worthless. You have never been worthless. The fact that you don't know how to swing a hammer doesn't change who you are." "And who am I, without the job, without the routine, without something to do?" "You're the man I love." Her voice was firm. "You're kind. You're patient. You're the only person in 30 years who looked at me and saw a human being instead of a title." She took his injured hand gently. "That matters more than any porch." "The porch still needs fixing." "Then we'll hire someone. That's what money is for." Daniel managed a weak smile. "I thought we weren't living off your money." "We're not. We're living off our money. Yours and mine, together." She squeezed his hand. "That was the deal, remember, partners?" "Partners," he repeated. "So stop trying to prove something and start figuring out what actually makes you happy. The porch can wait." What made Daniel happy, he discovered over the following weeks, was surprisingly simple. Morning coffee on the sagging porch, watching the mist rise over the fields. Long walks through town learning the names of shop owners who didn't know or care who they used to be. Evenings by the fire, reading books he'd been meaning to read for decades. And Victoria, always Victoria. He learned her rhythms in ways he never could have in Chicago. The way she hummed while making breakfast. The way she talked to plants like they could hear her. The way she cried sometimes quietly when she thought he wasn't watching, grieving the life she'd lost, even as she built a new one. "I had a dream about the office last night," she told him one evening. They were sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets watching the sun set. Good dream or bad dream? Neither. Just ordinary. "I was in a meeting, reviewing quarterly reports. Everyone was talking, and I was nodding, and it felt so normal." She paused. "And then I woke up and didn't know where I was." "Does that happen a lot?" "Less than it used to." She pulled her blanket tighter. "The first week I woke up every morning reaching for my phone, checking emails that weren't there, planning meetings that didn't exist. My brain couldn't accept that it was over. And now I wake up and see you, and I remember that this is real." She looked at him. "You're my anchor, Daniel. Do you know that I thought I was the one drifting? We're both drifting, but at least we're drifting together." Daniel reached over and took her hand. They sat in silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. "I called Sarah today," Victoria said eventually. "The friend who set up the blind date, the very one." "How'd that go?" She apologized. Profusely. Said she never meant for any of this to happen. She thought she was setting me up with some nice stranger, not one of my own employees. "Did you forgive her?" Victoria considered. "I thanked her." "Thanked her?" "If she hadn't meddled, I never would have walked into that diner. Never would have seen you sitting there looking like the loneliest man in the world. Never would have taken the risk that changed everything." "So you're grateful for the chaos?" "I'm grateful for you. The chaos was just the delivery method." Daniel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I'm grateful too. For Sarah. For the cold coffee. If that waitress had been faster with the refill, I might have left before you arrived." Victoria laughed. "Saved by slow service. The universe works in mysterious ways." 2 months into their Vermont life, Daniel got a call he didn't expect. He was in town buying groceries when his phone rang. Chicago area code. Unknown number. "Hello. Mr. Carter. This is Sandra Mitchell, from Meridian Industries." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Ms. Mitchell. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. What can I do for you?" A pause. "This is somewhat awkward. I'm calling because we made a mistake." "A mistake?" "Several mistakes, actually. Thomas Wright resigned last week. The board discovered some irregularities in his handling of company funds. Nothing criminal, but enough to lose confidence." Another pause. "In reviewing his tenure, some of us have had to reckon with how we handled the situation with Ms. Hayes." Daniel leaned against his car, groceries forgotten. "I'm listening." "There's a growing sentiment that she was treated unfairly. That the punishment didn't fit there wasn't even a crime, was there? Just a relationship between two consenting adults who happened to work for the same company." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the board would like to extend an invitation, to both of you, to return to Meridian." Daniel almost laughed. "Return." Ms. Hayes's position has been offered to 3 candidates since she left. All declined. Her reputation in the industry remains strong. Many believe the company's recent struggles stemmed directly from her departure. Sandra's voice softened. "We want her back, Mr. Carter, and we're willing to make significant concessions to make that happen." "Have you contacted her directly?" "We tried. She's not returning our calls." "Can you blame her?" "No, which is why I'm calling you. I thought perhaps you might be willing to deliver the message." Daniel stood in the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, mind racing. 6 months ago, this call would have meant everything. Vindication, justice, the chance to go back and reclaim what was lost. Now looking at the small town street around him, the mountains in the distance, the life he and Victoria were building together, it felt like a message from another world. "I'll tell her," he said finally. "But I already know what she's going to say." Victoria was in the garden when he got home. She'd started growing vegetables badly at first, but with increasing success. Something about nurturing living things seemed to heal a part of her that corporate life had damaged. "You're back late," she said, not looking up from the tomato plants she was watering. "Did you get the bread?" "I got a phone call." Something in his voice made her stop. She turned, watering can still in hand. "From who?" "Sandra Mitchell, HR director at Meridian." Victoria's expression didn't change, but her grip on the watering can tightened. "What did she want?" "Thomas Wright is out. The board is scrambling. They want you back." Silence. Victoria set down the can slowly. "They want me back," she repeated. "As CEO. Full reinstatement. They're willing to negotiate whatever terms you want." "Why?" "Because the company is struggling without you. Because they realize they made a mistake. Because apparently your reputation still matters more than their pride." Victoria turned away, looking out at the mountains. Daniel couldn't read her face. "When I was 25, she said quietly, "I made a promise to myself that I would build something that mattered, something that would last, something that would prove I wasn't just another small-town girl with big dreams and no future. You did that." "I did. And then I lost it." She took a breath. "And now they're offering to give it back." Daniel moved closer but didn't touch her. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "That's okay. You don't have to decide right now." Victoria turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. 6 months ago I would have jumped at this. No hesitation. That company was my identity, my purpose, my reason for existing. She gestured at the garden, the farmhouse, the quiet life they'd built. "But now I wake up in the morning and I'm not exhausted. I eat meals that I actually taste. I have time to read and think and just be." "You're happy here." "I am. Happier than I've been in 30 years. She took his hands. "But I also miss it. The challenge, the purpose, the feeling of building something bigger than myself." "You can have both, you know." "Can I?" "You can have anything you want, Victoria. That's what this is about. Not what they're offering. What you actually want." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hands and smiled. "I want to think about it. Really think. Not react, not decide based on pride or fear. Just consider what's right for us, both of us. Take all the time you need. Will you be okay? Whatever I decide." Daniel pulled her close. "I told you in Chicago, and I'll tell you again. I'm not going anywhere. Whether we're in Vermont, or back in that glass tower, or living on the moon, where you go, I go." Victoria buried her face against his chest. "I don't deserve you." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." "Then maybe you should stop trying to deserve me, and just accept that I'm here." She laughed, a watery sound muffled against his shirt. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the smartest woman I know." They stood there in the garden, holding each other, while the afternoon sun warmed their backs, and the tomato plants swayed gently in the breeze. The decision came 3 days later. Daniel was making breakfast pancakes, which he'd finally learned not to burn, when Victoria came downstairs. She was dressed, which was unusual for 7 a.m., hair done, makeup on, the armor she hadn't worn in months. He set down the spatula. "You decided." "I decided. And..." Victoria sat at the kitchen table. "I'm going to call them back. Accept a meeting. Hear what they have to say in person." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay. But I have conditions, non-negotiable ones." "Tell me." "First, I want a formal apology. Public. Acknowledging that the way I was treated was wrong." "That's fair." "Second, I want policy changes. Clear guidelines that protect employees who have relationships with other employees regardless of position. What happened to us should never happen to anyone else. Also fair. Third, she paused. Third, I want you on the board. Daniel nearly dropped his coffee cup. What? You heard me. Victoria, I'm an accountant. I don't know anything about. You know everything that matters. You're ethical. You're honest. You see things other people miss. She leaned forward. The board failed me because it was full of people who cared more about optics than truth. I want someone there who will tell me when I'm wrong, who will hold me accountable, who will never let me forget why I came back. That's a lot of pressure. I know. That's why I'm asking you. Her eyes held his. Will you do it? Daniel looked at the woman across from him. The CEO who had terrified him. The lover who had saved him. The partner who had chosen him again and again against all odds. On one condition, he said. Name it. We keep the farmhouse. Victoria blinked. What? We keep it. Come back here on weekends, holidays, whenever the city gets too heavy. He smiled. I liked fixing the porch, eventually. You put a nail through your hand. I'm a work in progress. Victoria laughed that real unguarded laugh he loved. Deal. Then yes, I'll do it. God help us both. She stood and crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. Thank you. For what? For everything. For staying. For believing. For being the man I didn't know I needed until you were standing right in front of me. Daniel kissed her forehead. Thank you for walking into that diner. I almost didn't. I know, but you did. He pulled back to look at her. You were brave when it would have been easier to walk away. And because of that, we're here. Together. Together. The flight back to Chicago felt different this time. Daniel sat by the window watching the clouds roll by, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A blind date gone wrong. A secret that couldn't be kept. A fall that felt like the end of everything. And now this. A return. A reinvention. A chance to do it right. Victoria sat beside him, reviewing notes for her meeting with the board. She'd been up since 4 a.m. preparing, strategizing, becoming the woman she used to be while holding on to the woman she'd become. Nervous? Daniel asked. Terrified? You don't look terrified. Years of practice. She smiled without looking up. How about you? Equally terrified. Less practice hiding it. You'll do fine. Just be yourself. That's what I'm afraid of. Victoria finally looked at him. Daniel, listen to me. You are exactly what that company needs. What I need. Don't second guess yourself. I'll try. Don't try. Do. She took his hand. We survived everything they threw at us. Scandal, resignation, exile. We survived it because we had each other. Nothing they can do to us now is worse than what we've already been through. When did you become the optimist? Somewhere between the tomato garden and pancakes that don't taste like charcoal. Daniel laughed. They were good pancakes. They were acceptable pancakes. We're still working on good. Another work in progress. Everything worth having is. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Daniel sat at the long conference table surrounded by faces he didn't know, and a few he recognized from his years of invisibility. Victoria commanded the room the way she always had, calm, precise, unshakable. But there was something different now. A warmth that hadn't been there before. A humanity that softened the edges of her power. She laid out her terms. The board negotiated. They pushed back on some points, conceded others. It was a dance Daniel had never been part of before, and watching Victoria lead it was like watching a master artist at work. By the end, they had an agreement. Victoria would return as CEO effective immediately. A public statement would be issued acknowledging the mishandling of her departure. New policies would be implemented to protect employee relationships, and Daniel would join the board as an independent director, a position created specifically for him. When it was over, when the handshakes were done and the papers were signed, Victoria and Daniel stood alone in the empty conference room. "We did it," she said. "You did it. I just sat there and tried not to look confused. You looked very distinguished. I looked terrified. Same thing from certain angles." She moved to the window, looking out at the city spread below. "I never thought I'd be back here." "Regrets?" "No, just processing." She turned to face him. "A year ago I was alone. Successful, powerful, respected, and completely, utterly alone. I had everything the world told me to want, and nothing that actually mattered. And now? Now I have you. I have a falling apart farmhouse in Vermont. I have tomato plants that might actually produce tomatoes this year. I have a life that makes sense even when it's messy." She smiled. "I have everything." Daniel crossed to her and took her hands. "I have a confession to make." "That sounds ominous." "The night we met at that diner, I was ready to give up. Not just on the date, on everything. I'd spent 53 years being invisible, and I'd finally accepted that invisible was all I'd ever be." "Daniel, let me finish." He squeezed her hands. "You changed that, not because you're powerful or successful or any of the things you accomplished, but because you saw me, really saw me. For the first time in my life, someone looked past the boring accountant and the empty apartment and the years of careful invisibility, and they found something worth keeping." Victoria's eyes were glistening. "You were always worth keeping." "I didn't know that until you." She pulled him into a kiss, deep, real. The kind of kiss that says everything words can't express. When they finally broke apart, Daniel whispered, "Ready to run a company, ready to change the world. I'll settle for changing the accounting department." Victoria laughed. "Start small. That's the spirit." They walked out of the conference room together, side by side, into the future they'd built from the wreckage of everything that came before. 6 months later, on the anniversary of their first meeting, Daniel took Victoria back to the diner. It looked exactly the same. Yellow lights, holiday decorations, the smell of coffee and grilled onions, the booth by the window where everything had started. "I can't believe this place is still here," Victoria said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I called ahead. They saved our table." "We have a table?" "Apparently we're local legends. The waitress told me they call this the CEO booth now." Victoria groaned. "Please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was." They ordered coffee, apple pie, the same things they'd had that first night when neither of them knew what they were walking into. "I have something for you," Daniel said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small red box tied with a gold ribbon. Victoria's breath caught. "Daniel, open it." She did. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant. A diamond that caught the light without demanding attention. "A year ago," Daniel said, "you gave me a watch because you noticed I was nervous. You said good leaders notice things." He took her hand. "I've been noticing things too. The way you laugh at your own jokes. The way you talk to tomato plants. The way you look at me like I'm someone worth looking at." "Daniel, I'm not good at speeches. I'm an accountant. I'm better with numbers than words." He took a breath. "But here's a number for you. 1. One woman. One chance. One life that finally makes sense because you're in it." Victoria was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and she didn't even try to hide them. "Is that a question?" she managed. "It's an offer, a partnership. The kind that doesn't have an exit clause or a board review or any conditions except one." "What's the condition?" "That we keep choosing each other, every day, no matter what." Victoria looked at the ring, at the man across from her, at the diner where her life had changed in ways she never could have predicted. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes. 1,000 times yes. To all of it. The partnership. The choosing. The rest of our lives." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger, It fit perfectly. "I love you," he said. "I love you too, even when you burn pancakes." "I've gotten better." "You've gotten acceptable. There's a difference." He laughed and pulled her close, kissing her in the booth by the window, while the diner buzzed around them and the world outside continued spinning. They had lost everything. They had found everything. And in the end, that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Some stories don't need permission. Some connections are worth the cost. And sometimes the blind date you almost walked away from becomes the truest thing you've ever known. Daniel and Victoria walked out of the diner hand in hand, into the cold winter night, into the rest of their lives. Together. Always together. And that was all that mattered.